Hello, I'm Tom Jacobs. I do astrology readings, spirit guide readings, do mediumship, animal communication, do all kinds of different readings and consults. You can see at tdjacobs.com. And right now I'm going to be wearing my toboggan hat of a spiritual teacher for a moment. And this video is about understanding and healing vengeance, or the urge toward vengeance, or you know, the mental loops we can get into where vengeance may seem like an option or seem like a desirable thing. I've been thinking about this for years. Honestly, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a client wrote me and said, "Can you do a teaching on vengeance?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And I started thinking about it. And then I started noticing through scrolling streaming video platforms, especially Netflix, how many entertainment options were about vengeance. And so I started thinking about it, and then in the course of that, a lot of Chiron stuff that I do in my astrology work became apparent, and I did an MP3 on the USA's fourth house Chironic wound. Anyway, it's all related, so as I'll talk about here in a bit. I don't want this to be terribly long, but I do want to treat the subject with some depth. So strap yourself in. I hope I hope you enjoy this. So, so what happens when somebody feels an urge toward vengeance? What happens? Well, somebody's angry. Somebody has become angry. We should start with we should postulate that or stipulate, sorry, not postulate, stipulate. I have all these big words in my head, but they're not organized right. Stipulate that anger comes from pain, a reaction to pain, and or a reaction about the threat of more pain. Like the fear of having to go through something, and then we get defensive and angry, and anger can come up as a defensive thing. And this is going to be central to how to heal this issue in a few minutes down the road here. So something happens and you're angry because it happened. You feel wronged. It's unjust. You've been taken advantage of. You've been cheated. You've been overpowered. You've been abused. You've been hurt, whatever. And this anger response comes out, and you don't know what to do with yourself except potentially act from that anger, right? So if we think about it as having been started with pain, well, we don't know how to deal with the pain that underlies the anger. Let's think about that for a minute. We don't know how to deal with the pain. Okay. And part of the vengeance thing can be I want someone else to hurt like I was hurt. Okay. Part of it is I want to basically, this is kind of a weird way to say it. I need to establish that what I'm feeling matters. And if I act out on other people, well, then there's evidence in the world of what I'm feeling and my situation. Um, Lashing out because you don't know what to do with the pain you're feeling, and you need someone else to see it or take it seriously. You need someone to take your feelings and your experience seriously. So what we want to do with this, how to heal vengeance, it's actually quite simple. It's challenging, but the steps are actually quite simple. You need to validate your own experience. A person needs to validate her or his own experience, meaning you have to decide that you're not waiting for other people to validate that you have the right to feel what you feel. So what does that look like? What does validation in that way look like? You let yourself feel the feelings, whatever they are. You don't judge them and you don't shame them. You don't turn away from them. You don't blame yourself for feeling what you feel. You don't apologize because you feel what you feel. Then the feeling is unfolding and it's expressing, and you're angry and crying or whatever, but you are holding space for yourself. In other words, I could say to you, and I do this with clients and students all the time, you have the right to have been shaped by your experiences. You have the right to feel in response to what you've experienced and what you've gone through. And if you feel that you need others to validate that, that's where vengeance can come in. Okay. So a person, consider that a person is a collection of parts of self with different experiences and different agendas. And there's a conscious part of you, and then there are a bunch of other parts of you floating around, unconscious parts of you, subconscious, inner children, past life parts, different parts of you. If you can cultivate the confidence to know that what you've been through means something, you won't wait for anyone else. You won't need anyone else to tell you that you are right to feel this pain. There's nothing wrong with you because you're feeling this pain. If somebody else hurts as a result of what I do because I'm hurt, then I feel validated. Well, what if we just validated ourselves in the beginning? We could let everybody else off the hook because we know that this feeling is real and it matters. One of the reasons I'm doing this video now after years of this, thinking about it and watching different stories play out in the world, is because here in the U.S., the leader of one of the major political parties vows vengeance against his enemies, which is just anybody who tries to hold him accountable for crimes and fraud and whatever. Anybody who acts like he's not above the law, these are his enemies. And he's talking about vengeance, and I wanted to put this video out to kind of give you something to think about. And that person is covering up vulnerability, creating a smoke screen through constant insults and attacks and punches out toward anybody else to hide the vulnerability that he feels. Because vulnerability, especially I'd say in, a lot of Western culture, but especially here in America, is seen as weakness. If you feel something and it affects you, well, then you're weak. Unless it's like joy or pride or something like that. So, and this is related to certain aspects of gun culture also. And I think about that thing about vulnerability and masculinity and even the posturing, um, you know, pry this from my cold dead hands. There's a vulnerability that's being covered over in some corners of this culture. I'm not talking about people who know what they're doing and are responsible and teach each other good practices and whatever, hunters, whatever. I'm not talking about that, of course. I'm talking about clinging to a gun as a symbol that you can defend yourself. Well, that screams, I'm maybe vulnerable and I don't know what to do with it. Um, I think about this is tangent time. Not really. It's really related. I think about this in terms of entertainment media and stories from the Old West, um, westerns, right? TV shows and movies that portray models of masculinity that the American psyche and Western psyche, perhaps more broadly, is trying to work out. And recently, I rewatched one of my favorite movies, which is The Quick and the Dead. And this time I watched it, maybe the third or fourth time, and I don't know if it's been out 10 or 15 or 20 years, I don't know, but anyway, I remembered liking it, and so I watched it again. I was kind of nudged and guided to watch it. And there's a storyline about vengeance in there, but there's a story, but all the characters, all the primary characters involved in this particular situation that is the center of the story, a gunslinger tournament for a cash prize run by the guy who basically owns the town and is kind of tyrannical and whatever, cruel. But all the people have their own relationship with this masculinity, this posturing, and of course it's all about gunslinging, guns in this story. You have the teenager who wants to prove himself. There's dudes who show up who are bragging about how they're the greatest ever and they can't, they can't lose, they can't be killed, whatever. There's a woman who's living out a vengeance story, and so her relationship with that pain, etc. Anyway, there's a missionary who, when he was a criminal, had killed a priest and then was trying to make up for it, and chose to be a pacifist, but is roped in, forced into this gunslinging contest by the tyrannical guy who owns the town. Blah blah blah. So just think about these models of masculinity and the need to prove that you're tough. And the vengeance thing is wrapped up with that. Because if if I'm affected and then I can make you hurt like I hurt, I feel validated, but also the attention is taken away from me. I don't need to feel vulnerable because look at you. Like you're not so great. You also can be ruined or harmed or hurt or something like that. So thinking about this video, thinking about calling it healing vengeance. But I want to say something really that I think is really important. Just anecdotally, I've told a lot of students this over the years. When I'm hurt and this comes up, I'm a Scorpio. I have a Scorpio sun. I have Pluto conjunct Venus. So sometimes in relationships, Pluto is triggered, and sometimes it's a revenge is kind of a Plutonian thing. Sometimes you hurt so deeply you don't know what to do, so you lash out. Or you might want to. And what I do is I give myself, typically it's 3 days, to have a revenge fantasy, and I don't act on it. And there's a very clever part of me who comes up with a plan and is trying to convince me that this is what I should do to get back at somebody for hurting me. And what I learned is not to judge this. Again, I said earlier, don't judge your emotions, don't blame yourself for feeling what you're feeling. We always make it worse when we judge ourselves for having human emotions. Well, isn't a feeling of wanting to get back at somebody, isn't that unhealthy because it's negative, you might ask, spiritual teacher Tom? We're not indulging the negative when we do this. We're not feeding the negative. We're hearing a part of us react, and we have the opportunity to validate that part of us. That's what it looks like. One time I'll tell you this story. I I'd met this fellow astrology enthusiast at a yoga workshop. She was reading a book by one of my teachers, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm in his program," and we kind of hit it off, talking about astrology and stuff, and she was a comedian and an actress who always lied about her age. That's the setup. And I had her real birth data because we were talking astrology stuff and trading charts. She had my chart, I had her chart. And in the course of our friendship, her neighbor died. The neighbor had 3 cats. So when the neighbor died inside the apartment, the 3 cats were outside. So people noticed, and eventually somebody called the authorities and they found the lady had passed. So this former friend of mine found homes for the 3 cats. I don't know if she took one and found 2 homes, whatever, but I took one of the cats. And I had this really interesting bond with this cat, and it was helping me with my inner child garbage. And I felt really like I had a chance to heal something really important with my dad, who at this point had already passed away, and we'd had a not such a close relationship. And when he died, I had a lot of just anger and pain that had not been processed. So I say this was 2008 and he had passed in 2007, something like that. And this person who found the homes for the cats had a very specific way she thought the cat should be fed. And she believed I wasn't doing it. And I did it and then I didn't do it. I just let the cat be a cat. And so she broke into my house and stole the cat. I came home one day and a screen near my front window, near my front door, was like bent and open, and the cat was gone. And I had this real deep heart opening for this cat. I was like getting in touch with my inner child, having so much compassion for the position my dad found himself in, facing my vulnerability and sensitivity that he didn't know what to do with it himself, and I didn't know what to do with him. Anyway, this whole multidimensional healing process was profound. And she effing broke into my house and stole the cat. I was hurt. I was angry. I think a lot of people, not having proof, but may have suspected that and maybe called the police or something. I didn't do that because I had a revenge fantasy. I was going to publish far and wide her real birth data because she, again, was an actress and a comedian who lied about her age, always saying she was younger. And part of me said, "Oh, you can't do that." And part of me said, "I'm going to do it. I have every right to do it. Look at what this person did." So I entertained that fantasy for about 3 days. I let that part talk to me. I thought about it. I had a plan. And part of me was even like rubbing his hands together and giggling maniacally at the thought of hurting her as she had hurt me, because she had hurt me. And I learned through that to let myself have that fantasy, and then it relaxes, and then I gain more conscious perspective on what's going on, and I can deal with it, and I can deal with the pain behind the anger. I don't have to act out from anger. There are a bunch of examples. Again, as a Scorpio with Pluto conjunct Venus, um, there are a bunch of examples. Not a bunch. I mean, gosh, I don't know. I mean, not like 100, maybe like 6 or 7, 6-ish, which seems like a lot, like as a pattern, right? But the pain that can lead to that kind of thinking is human. So I'm not indulging the negative. I'm letting myself have that feeling, so I'm not shoving it down or shaming myself for having human emotion. In that way, I'm listening to the part of me who has the plan, and I'm not acting from it. So I'm not feeding and indulging negativity. I'm not being negative. I'm not bringing negative things to light or to life. I'm not creating negativity. But if I shove it down, it will fester. So we listen to that part of us. We acknowledge the anger, and eventually the pain comes up that's behind it. The pain behind the anger comes up. And in my case, I just don't do the thing. Just don't do it. Like I know that's not in my heart to do, but a part of me has that reaction sometimes. It's a normal human reaction. You're so hurt, you don't know what to do, and you lash out. This has implications for all kinds of things. In domestic violence, in school shootings, in any kind of mass shooting, in all kinds of abuse situations, you know, this has wider implications. And as we, deal in here in the US with the you know, epidemic of gun violence, sometimes people are lashing out because of what they've been holding inside. They may not know how to talk about it. It's not about mental illness, by the way, if you're not clear on that yet. It's about feeling your emotions are valid. It's about wanting to have an effect on the world to validate the feelings that you have. Okay. So this kind of thing can serve as a learning vehicle for you to validate your own feelings. I don't mean mass shootings, I mean this whole vengeance thing, this whole like urge toward trying to lash out or get back at somebody or something. A vehicle for you to learn to validate yourself, which is what I'm told by an ascended master I channel, Hermes, Jehudi, Saint Germain Thoth, that being, also known as Merlin. That being says, the human task is to learn self-validation. In spiritual circles, you've heard it said that self-love is the key to all of it. And when I hear that, it's vague and squishy. I don't know what to do with that. But if you say self-validation, and I say you have the right to have been shaped by your experiences, and you don't need anyone else to validate that you have human feelings, that's a good way to approach it and to get into it. So sometimes people feel when they've been wronged and hurt that somebody owes them something. I'd like for you to put your attention on yourself. And you don't owe yourself anything, but you have the opportunity to acknowledge that your feelings are real and that they matter. And I'll say this, your anger matters. Your pain matters. Your experience and how you've been shaped by what happens to you, it matters. But you're the only one who can really make that true, who can validate that. So people come to me, I'm a counseling astrologer and an energy worker and a channel and whatever, and I do spirit guide readings. And sometimes when I say to a person, you have the right to have been shaped by this painful experience. Like you have the right to feel this sorrow or this anger or this bitterness. Like you have the right to feel sorrowful and depressed and angry and bitter and hopeless. You have the right to feel that given what you've been through in this life, in past lives, whatever, and other lives. Sometimes the person's whole thing just relaxes because they've never been told it's okay to feel what they feel. So, whatever you're experiencing, I encourage you to give yourself space to feel it without shame, without judgment. Some feelings are socially unacceptable, but we live in a social construct in which this validation is not occurring. At some point, kids cry about stuff, and sometimes adults say, maybe it's time to stop crying about baby stuff, or whatever. It's time to grow up. And we socialize each other sometimes in not validating our feelings and emotions. So this is an invitation to you. Even if you don't have that vengeful feeling, that vengeance thing, to validate your emotions and feelings and to give yourself space to feel what you feel. and to truly acknowledge in a centered, peaceful, mature way that every emotion you have is a human emotion. And therefore, it's part of the human experience. It's part of your experience. You are human. And to learn to shed judgment about the nature of our feelings, the content of our feelings, the reality of our feelings, to shed those judgments and shame and blame and guilt and regret because we felt something or cried or angry at a certain time and it was inappropriate. To shed those judgments is a very healing process. So I'll close this video by saying, you have the right to feel what you feel. You have the right to have been shaped by your experiences, whether from this life or other lives. And if you can validate those things and share with others this kind of idea, we can heal vengeance. All right. Thanks for your time and energy. Thanks for playing. Hope this has been useful. You can see what I'm up to at tdjacobs.com. Again, I do consultations, individual work to help people work through pain and trauma and anger and things like that at tdjacobs.com. Take care.